Chat, this is the interviews that I've been waiting for. The interviews with Steve Danuser, because as most of you know, this is sort of the only thing I care about when it comes to World of Warcraft. Like, I care about the story. That's the only thing I've ever cared about. For those of you that maybe don't know anything about WoW, Steve Danuser is the lead narrative director for World of Warcraft. So he creates most of the stories.
Hello everyone. Today we're doing something rather special. I got to sit down with none other than Steve Danuser, narrative director for World of Warcraft. We're getting closer to the release of Dragonflight, and while I would love for them to spoil the entire story before it's even told, I figured that it might be wiser to ask some other questions, like how do they view the way that the story is being told in the game, how do they look back at adding the jailer at the tail end of it, or where did the Centaur come from? All of that and more in this video. Timestamps will be in the description. Of course, thank you so much to Steve for sitting down with me and everyone else that made this happen. With that, sit back, relax, and I hope you'll enjoy. Steve, thank you very much for giving me the time of day to actually do this interview. Hello there.
Oh, this is awesome. I'm very happy to talk to you.
It's been a long time coming, I think. Before I dive into the question, because I got 30 minutes and I could honestly talk to you with about lore for 5 hours. My understanding is that you are the lead narrative designer at World of Warcraft. Could you very quickly tell us what it's all about?
Yeah, actually, I'm the narrative director now of World of Warcraft, and yeah, so I oversee the high level story, our planning, our plot lines as they unfold. I work with a group of creatives to kind of flesh out what our expansion plans are, and kind of pitch storylines and the characters that'll be involved, and those kinds of things, and then take those ideas and talk about them with the team and energize them and get them excited about where our storylines are going and for all the content that they're going to build. Yeah, that's.
They should get someone to get the player base excited for where the fucking story is going. Because I don't think the problem is that the fucking writers aren't excited for the story. The issue is that the rest of us are not as infused half the fucking time with where the story goes.
That's really the main areas I oversee. We have a narrative team that we've built up over the years, and they work closely with our quest designers and our content team and other people who are making the World of Warcraft.
I just want to say here, and I don't know if this is going to be a question that Nobbel will ask, but this is something that I actually said during one of the, I think it was during the Frozen Sodium Throne, episode 24 from last week, where... So one of the gripes that I currently have with World of Warcraft that I really think Steve Danuser should be looking into, and if Steve obviously ever watches this video, Steve, for the love of God, please, man, could you get the writers to actually write the quest text in World of Warcraft? Because so often you'll be on this giant main storyline, but the quest text is very fucking underdeveloped. Like, you'll read the quest text and it's basically a box like this big with no information. There's no story, there's no extra reveal. You know, it basically just tells you why you need to go collect 5 apples, and then once you've collected the 5 apples, that's when the story starts again. And I do think if you had actual writers writing those quest text, there could be a lot of subtext hidden in there. There could be a lot of extra little lore nuggets hidden in there. So it would probably be nice if you could, if you guys could start writing that, rather than just the quest design team, who obviously just want to write some quest text, because what they call it is flavor text. And I don't think that main story, and I don't mind flavor text when it exists for side quests and things like that. You know, it's a side quest, who cares, right? It's just meant to make the world feel a little bit more big. But when it's main storyline quests, it shouldn't be flavor text. That should be literal lore text. It should be things that those of us that care about the lore, that actually read every single quest, should walk away from that knowing even more than what anyone else that didn't read the quests knew about it. So yeah, that would be my one sort of dream, if I could have one.
Content to ensure that story is woven through everything that we do, and it's really a joy to work in this great universe that so many people like yourself care so deeply about.
very deeply, as you most likely also read on the internet. And now our adventures are going to go into the Dragonflight, into the Dragon Isles. Now, obviously, I would love to ask you questions and like reveal the story that is to come, but I think that would be unfair. Let the story unfold itself. So I would rather talk about the design philosophy and where we come from as we go into the new expansion. So first of all, my question is, I've had a few friends of mine come back into the story, and a lot of people on stream ask as well. They would love to experience the story of Warcraft within World of Warcraft itself. And over the years, that's become rather difficult. With patch content removed, the Cataclysm revamp. In Shadowlands, for example, with the Covenants now being unlocked, all the chapters are thrown at you in one go. How does the team view this problem of narrative storytelling, and are there any plans in the works to fix this, to make this better experience?
Well, you're right
That's a
that
lot of
there is a
question.
ton of content that has been added to World of Warcraft over the years. And, we do spend a lot of time thinking and talking about, the best ways to curate that and to make it accessible. And when we introduced Chromie Time, that was one of the ways that we tried to, let's present these expansions as kind of storylines that you can delve into and try.
No, no, Steve, no. I'm sorry, but no. You can't do Chromie Time once you hit max level. So, in other words, what you want is for someone to literally level. How many expansions do we have now? 7, 8? I think it's 9 maybe at this point. It's 9, right? Because it's 10. Because we're on 10.0. So you want someone to level 10 fucking characters to see every single one of the stories for every single one of the expansions. So here's where the problem comes in, Steve. You don't even need to finish the full fucking story of every single expansion within Chromie Time. You don't even get to the end with Chromie Time because you level so quickly that you basically get to about maybe halfway through, maybe 3/4 through, and then you're done. Then you move on to, whatever is the next expansion or whatever you have to go do. So right now it would be, I think, Battle for Azeroth. In the next expansion, they already said that it's going to be Battle for Azeroth again. And then probably after that, it's going to be Dragonflight. But you don't even finish that story. And you have to also then consider the fact that you have things like dungeons and raids that also tell part of the story. In fact, most of the story is told through the raids. And when you do Chromie Time, you are not going to do the raids. You're just not. There's not going to be enough people to actually get those raids done. And there's no one else that's going to help you because there's no incentive to do all the raids in World of Warcraft. So ultimately, you would have to figure out also how to tell those stories through raids. Now, you can do those through making the raid soloable for characters that is doing it for the first time, but then also adjusting the XP to such an extent that people actually do have to go through all of the patch content and also all of the raids and dungeons. But most importantly, I should be able at max level to do Chromie Time for whichever expansion I want. So if I want to re-experience the expansion of Wrath, I should be able to do that through Chromie Time even at max level. Because right now Chromie Time I don't think is the magic pull to fixing the problem.
Try to experience as what it feels like to level up through those and play your characters through those. And there was a lot of successes there and things we want to keep refining and want to think about. And, there's times where we have taken content out of the game, but that's never our preference. We usually try to find a way to make it still persist. Obviously, back in the day of Cataclysm, I wasn't around, so I'm not sure all the decisions that went into that. But, that was probably the biggest change to the existing world.
Yeah.
And, but these days, what we try to do is make that content accessible. And we would love to hear from the community about your ideas about how to better surface that, how to make it clearer where these pieces of content are. Another addition.
Sorry, just FYI, this is going to be the worst way to watch this fucking video because I am going to interrupt a lot. I am incredibly passionate about the story of World of Warcraft. But it was an understatement saying that Cataclysm was probably the largest thing to have happened to the world. Cataclysm was the worst thing that could ever have happened to World of Warcraft, because when Cataclysm came out, it fundamentally destroyed 3 previous expansions. It literally took all of the lore and story from the 3 previous expansions and threw it away. Because everything was from Cataclysm, everything was fragmented. If you played through from level 1 in Cataclysm, you would go to TBC and none of it would make sense. Why am I in TBC? What is the point here? Because you were playing through Cataclysm zones, and Cataclysm zones had everything to do with Cataclysm and nothing to do with the actual experience of vanilla. So you would go to TBC and you'd be like, why? What the hell is the point of being here? Then you go through TBC, you come back to Azeroth, and now you're in Wrath of the Lich King. Again, none of this makes sense because the old world did not prepare you for a lot of the things that you needed to know going into Wrath of the Lich King. So, by the way, Cataclysm was just devastating to the lore. I'm not saying Cataclysm was a bad expansion. I actually happen to love Cataclysm, but that's because I started playing at the end of Classic. So I got all of those experiences when they were still relevant. So Cataclysm was just really a new experience for me overall. But I do think Cataclysm destroyed the original story of World of Warcraft. Just incredibly bad for the story.
We made to the game was like our campaign interface, which didn't exist in the older expansions, but that's been a great way to help people at least have insight into kind of the thread that they're on and the campaign that they're playing through at a time. But we talk about ways to, better surface that. So it's an ongoing process, and we don't feel like we're there yet, but want to keep working at it. And we have a great UI team that really wants to help us present our content in the best way possible. So those are discussions we continue to have with them.
And I imagine feedback would be on the forums or on Twitter. But then one of the things people run into is, for example, in order to experience the storyline, an example would be Sylvanas' motivation when it comes to work with the jailer. They have to go to third parties, like books, or that the books themselves are being told from a perspective now. So it's not even actual clear information. It's rather an opinion or a character that tells the storyline. What is the design plan going forward in Dragonflight? Can we expect the story to be in books again, or what?
I just want to, so I'm actually a huge fan of perspective-based storytelling because I think it allows for so many more possibilities, especially since getting into the Warhammer universe and reading. I'm now on my 2nd book in the Warhammer universe, the Dark Imperium Plague War, and it is just incredible to read a book that is just fundamentally told from the perspective of different characters. But that has to be made very clear to people before they get into it. The biggest mistake Blizzard ever made was they presented the Chronicles of World of Warcraft as the Bible of World of Warcraft. They said that this is the canonical codified lore of World of Warcraft, and then later they came out and said, never mind, this was just written from the perspective of the Titans. Now you have players that feel cheated, that feel incredibly wronged because I spent a shit ton of money buying the books, the Chronicles of World of Warcraft, and while I am not at all sad that I bought it because they were incredible and they still remain incredible to this day, it would have been nice if I knew from the beginning that this is the lore as told by the Titans. So I do think that Blizzard still has a lot of sort of communication errors there where they don't always make it clear to players what to expect, because when it comes to subjective storytelling, or in this case perspective-based storytelling, nothing is true but everything is true, right? So that's effectively how you have to look at that. Everything you read is true, but it's true from this perspective, and that perspective can change.
What is the design behind it?
Well, again, I can't speak to the decisions that were made in the past, but the way that I look at it for when we have our novels is that we want to tell stories that best fit the medium that they are, that the strengths of the medium. So the game is about gameplay, and it's about playing a game, and certainly we have lots of cinematics and we have lots of dialogue and things like that, but we want our storyline to come through the action, through the world itself, through the places you go, the things you see happening, and that your character is able to engage with, and then punctuate those gameplay experiences with highly, action moments that our cinematics can do really well, or emotional moments that, as you've seen, our amazing cinematics team keeps leveling up their skills at being able to convey those emotions. I think that books and print, whether it's comics or novels, I think those are really good at getting inside the mind of characters. And so when it comes to something like showing a perspective of someone, that's a strength of print media, as opposed to in the game, where it's much harder to see those insights unless they're kind of monologuing or kind of telling you very exposition heavy, kind of, where you're just sitting and listening. And some people like that, but we like the game to be much more visceral in terms of you're playing through something. So
the game is more focused.
But I do think you can have both, because you could have those monologues with the floating dialogue that we already have in World of Warcraft. You have these floating heads that pop up all the time and give you floating dialogue. For players that don't give a shit, they just, turn that down, don't have to listen to it, just keep doing their quests. For players like myself that do give a shit, I just stand there and I just watch as they have these conversations. So I do think you could have both. I don't think you have to shoehorn players like Final Fantasy does, for example, where you absolutely have to stand there, and sometimes you can watch stories for up to 50 minutes, just story after story after story of just massive dialogue taking place. I don't think you have to have that, because I think for a lot of players that would just be devastating. But I think for players that care, like myself, and I'm assuming others in this chat, I do think having both, because I accept what Steve Danuser is saying insofar as for World of Warcraft, that level of storytelling isn't really viable. But I would say, and this is maybe a lot of you disagree with me, and I'd love to know if you do, why you do, but I don't think, I would be hard-pressed to find anything that a book can do that a game can't do as well, if not better. I fundamentally believe that. And that's not saying that books aren't great. I love reading. But games can have the exact same impact, if not more, because in a game, you can have all of the text that you would have in a book, plus then you can actually show what it looks like. So rather than having a book that explains to you, like Dark Imperium, sometimes it'll be pages and pages just explaining the interior of, Macragge's Honor or of the Emperor's Pride. And in a game, you can actually show the interior while then going on with the story. So players don't have to go through pages and pages of exposition in order to get to the actual story. They just get the story and they can see with their own eyes what is happening and what the interior of this place would look like. So I think games is just an incredible medium for storytelling. Maybe not World of Warcraft, and specifically as Steve said there, they want the game to be more about the gameplay, but I do think there are ways in sort of balancing that out.
On the gameplay, whereas the books are to add to it. So if we take, for example, the Shadowlands as an example, like Sylvanas' motivation with the jailer, the whole Lirav connection, for example, is not portrayed in the game until after the fact. Like we got Lirav added to the Ghostlands, I believe, like an after thing, but it's not exactly clearly explained in game. If we look at the balance that the Shadowlands had when it comes to storytelling, or for example, the Cataclysm, where Cairn died in a book, how does that balance going forward work?
Yeah, well, I don't want to use the books to have major events happen within them that you won't see in game. So like your example of Cairn dying in the book, or some of the stuff with the trial of Garrosh and how it transitioned into Warlords of Draenor. Like I would prefer that the books do more to kind of reveal extra information about things that are happening in the world. And so in that regard, like the Sylvanas novel was really great in that we got to see both history that we can't really portray in the game in any sort of, in that same depth and meaning. And we also got to see some of her insights as she was going through things in the Shadowlands. Now, I will say that we could have done a stronger job of showing some of those motivations in game. And
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for fucking admitting that. So I just want to say, Nitro, I absolutely agree with you. And it's so good that he's finally saying this. Because I think the Sylvanas novel, was absolutely incredible. But a lot of the motivations would have really been good in the game. Because here's the problem. Everything that we know about the jailer after the novel would have really helped to get players excited about the jailer in the game. The problem is that we went through the whole of Shadowlands, saw the jailer, hated the fucking jailer, and then comes the book, and we finally learn something about the jailer that actually makes you go, oh, all right, that kind of makes sense. I can see the reasoning here. That's not horrible. So I do think they have to do a lot better when it comes to subtext. So it's not just about, so what Steve said here, he said they don't want big moments to be in the books that you won't see in the game. But I also think that it's incredibly important that any sort of motivational subtext is also not left exclusively for the box. It's fine if you put history in there. It's fine if you put perspectives in there. But when it comes to subtext that would explain emotional states, or that would explain or that would necessitate a certain story level, that has to be in the game. I have to understand why characters are doing the things that they're doing before they're doing it. Otherwise, I can't get excited about those characters. And I'm not saying give everything away. I'm not saying, beforehand tell us everything that's happening. That's not the point. You can have a lot of mystery, but then I have to have enough before we go into the mystery parts to actually get excited for the mystery. The issue is that Shadowlands had so much mystery, but I knew so little that I couldn't even get excited for the mystery. Because I felt like I was living a fucking mystery, where the developers just didn't trust me enough to give me anything. And I was just sort of, waiting for the next big thing to happen to actually try to make sense of what the hell is happening in the game. So I'm glad that he's admitting that they could have done more.
We could have done more with that as well. And that's a lesson that we learn going forward in terms of our storytelling and how we get those important character moments across. So it's always a learning process for us. I don't think that we, hopefully we try not to repeat ourselves, and that we're always trying to improve our craft. And that was part of the process too, of thinking about Dragonflight and what kind of books we want associated with this expansion. And we didn't do a novel that we had set between the two expansions that had a lot of backstory or had a lot of things that you kind of needed to know going into the expansion. We are doing a short story that will be coming out in the near term, but cool. But that was more about giving a specific moment in time that is more flavorful, and it doesn't, whether you read it or not doesn't really impact your enjoyment of.
And the short story,
I like that.
Will be available on the WoW website as well, I'd imagine. Yep, the short story, beautiful,
absolutely, for free for everyone to read.
Always great to hear. About lessons learned for the Shadowlands, we saw a major impacts that are going to ripple on in the future of the storytelling. And when we're talking about Shadowlands, we have to talk about the jailer. They've been retroactively added basically at the tail end of the story of Warcraft, as in the jailer pretty much made the story of Warcraft happen up to the point of the Shadowlands, if I understood it right. Looking back at that decision and looking back at the reception of the jailer and how that all played out, how does the team look at that?
Well, I wouldn't put it that, certainly the jailer and the influence of death is probably the larger influence that is seeded through Warcraft's history. And I think you can still play through that content or, read those experiences and just take them for what they are if you want. You can play Warcraft 3 still today. You can play through, our Wrath of the Lich King expansion now in Classic. And you can take those stories as you want. But with Shadowlands, what we were trying to show was that death with a capital D is this kind of cosmic influence that has touched Azeroth in ways that were different, but yet similar to how forces like Order have touched Azeroth, or how the Void has touched Azeroth and affected its history. So what that really was...
Yeah, that, guys, death touched you in ways that you wouldn't even know about, but it has touched you. Do you feel touched?
Was showing that that death is a force that wants things, that all these cosmic forces are driven to become kind of the dominant force in the universe. And the Jailer and what he was trying to do by reaching Zereth Mortis and going into the Sepulchre, that was about him trying to make death the dominant force in the cosmos. And while we thwarted him there, the implications of that story do affect how we look at these cosmic powers and their role in the universe. And so I think in that regard, it gave us a lot of fuel for future storylines and hopefully make fans, give them some interesting things to think about and chew on.
Because there was mention in-game, I believe in the new dungeon released today, with the books of the first ones, that there are more Zeros out there. So not just for the domain of death, but also all the other cosmic domains. But you mentioned that you could still experience the story of Warcraft and the Lich King and everything that's built upon without the touch of the Jailer. But at the end of the day, it was the Jailer and in combination with the Nephrius and the influence of the Dreadlords that caused all these events to happen pretty much since the dawn of Azeroth. If we take a look at all the events that happened that led into stopping the Jailer, one could argue like, okay, we had a storyline where a force like Kil'jaeden or the Burning Legion had threat and responsibility, but actually it was the Jailer, or the Titans did something, but actually it was the Jailer. Isn't that a major change retroactively to a storyline that was already established?
Well,
Can I just say, Nobbel is kind of fucking brutal. Like, Nobbel's questions are incredibly fucking brutal. Without saying it, Nobbel is calling Steve Danuser to task here. Just, asking all the questions that most of us... This might be one of the best interviews of a developer I have ever fucking seen.
The Jailer and his allies, because it wasn't just him, he was locked away in the maw, but he had allies who were helping him, and people like Denathrius had agents of their own. So it doesn't change the things that the Legion did. It doesn't change the things that Kil'jaeden put in motion. It just shows that there were other forces who were nudging some of those things along. But we didn't change any of the history of the events of Warcraft 3 or Wrath of the Lich King. Those things happened just as they play out in those games. We didn't touch any of that stuff. We just wove in some additional motivation and some machinations behind the scenes.
I don't know if Nobbel doesn't have the time here to keep pushing on this, but there's definitely more room to push. Like, if I could have an unlimited interview with Steve Danuser, I would absolutely push back on this. And I would say, okay, wait a second. Steve, you understand that motivation is really important, because Sargeras speaking to the Nathrezim and finding out about this giant threat of the Void, and Sargeras then trying to destroy all life on Azeroth because he's trying to stop the Void Lords, that is a thing that, creates a giant plot behind it as to why Sargeras thought that this was the right way to do it, and also why Sargeras decided to join the Foul in order to get this done, and then of course why the Titans decided to, face him, and why they died to him and all that. But now you kind of went and you said, no, never mind. It was actually the Jailer that lied to him. So now Sargeras, coming from this giant 5-head, possible, 5D chess player character that everyone is afraid of, becomes just another tool in the toolkit of Zuvul. So Sargeras is actually just a moron because he fell for the lies of Zuvul. So ultimately, that makes Sargeras lose a lot of respect in the eyes of the players, where most of us have always really loved Sargeras. Now Sargeras is just a tool. The same thing happened with Sylvanas in the story. Sylvanas went from this crazy 5D chess player that just trusts no one and wants to do something, to just a tool, just a moron that couldn't tell lies and facts from each other, and no one really should care at all. So it does matter, because a lot of the time, much of what storytelling is the motivations of those stories. What motivates a character is as important as what the character will do after it's been motivated to do it. So I do think that it is still a massive retcon, no matter how you slice it. It is a giant retcon.
Danath, the books that you can now find in the Uldaman revamped dungeon add some additional texture and thought, but again, none of that is saying that the jailer or the forces of death manipulated the Titans. That's still a separate storyline. It was really that there was some manipulation of the Legion and what they were trying to do in order to get the influence of death rooted in Azeroth. That was really what was going on there, because again, the jailer needed that energy of Azeroth to be drawn into Zereth Mortis to do what he wanted to do, which was reshape the cosmos in his own image.
Okay. Speaking of Woven and Zereth Mortis and everything, especially the books as well that we're going to see, there's again the mention of the first ones. And if I understood the storyline with the first ones correctly, once upon a time we had the Titans that brought order to the universe, and the first ones are established as a mysterious force that brought order to the cosmic domains, if I understood it right. But it also meant that there was a woven fate, a true Mawwalker, gateways opening to us, prophesized. A lot of it seemed to be like there was already a path destined for us. Now with the defeat of the jailer and Shadowlands come to a close, are we still walking the path predestined by the first ones, going into Dragonflight, or is that completely closed off now?
So it wasn't that the first ones laid out an exact path that mortals were walking. I think what the first ones did, because they are these beings that kind of sit above the cosmic forces that we've known so far, like the Titans and the Void Lords. The first ones predate them. And what they did was prepare for...
Chat, I need you to listen very fucking closely to what Steve Danuser says here, because we will not have these arguments ever fucking again. Listen closely.
A lot of it seemed to be like there was already a path destined for us. Now with the defeat of the jailer and Shadowlands come to a close, are we still walking the path predestined by the first ones, going into Dragonflight, or is that completely closed off now?
So it wasn't that the first ones laid out an exact path that mortals were walking. I think what the first ones did, because they are these beings that kind of sit above the cosmic forces that we've known so far, like the Titans and the Void.
Like the Titans and the first and the Eternal Ones and the Void Lords and all that. The first ones are above the Titans. So if ever again one of you want to go, the Titans are the first ones, I will literally just go watch the fucking interview, bro. We're done discussing this. I am right. You are wrong. The Titans are not the first ones. I don't want to hear it again. I don't want to fucking argue about this again. The Titans are not the first ones. End of discussion. All right, chat? All right? Let's go.
Void Lords, the first ones predate them. And what they did was prepare for eventualities, is the way that I would put it. So if you think about how, like, the Titans represent belief in one path, one structure, and the Void represents all things being possible, you could imagine that the first ones, who sit kind of above them on that cosmic scale, have elements of both of those things. So, and those are different perspectives, but yet there can be ways that those outlooks can work together. So the things with that the first ones kind of left behind for us in the Shadowlands, it was not that, they are going to follow this one path. It was that these are things that someday, if the flow of the universe plays out in ways that they could foresee, that these mortals who would become increasingly important for the fate of the cosmos, that they would have some of these tools available to them. So it wasn't predetermined, but they put some things out there into the universe that might be of use for us.
But the keepers
Interesting. So you could effectively look at the first ones and say that the different cosmological forces are personality traits of the first ones. So if you were to go through the effort of combining all of the cosmological forces into a single force, and you sort of sketched out what that personality would look like, that would be the first ones. They both have the ability to hyper-focus on a single truth, but also the ability to understand that multiple truths may in fact be possible. So in this, I would almost say they have a preferred truth that they would like to play out, but they also understand that different decisions could lead to different outcomes. And then, of course, what they would do, unlike the Void, so the Light, for example, believes in a single truth and therefore only takes that one truth as the possible truth. And what the Light then does is it uses force and coercion to keep everyone on that simple truth. The Order, for example, provides order to the point where it sort of coerces everyone into a single truth. It doesn't necessarily force everyone into a truth, but it does coerce everyone into a single truth through the creation of order. Whereas the Void sees all truths, it doesn't accept any of those truths as the truth. Instead, it simply operates within the knowing that all truths may at one point or another be true. And this would be, if you took a first one like that, it would be like they also use order, some coercion, but also some freedom to allow for all truths to play out, and then the eventuality that all those truths would come together into what they would consider to be the righteous path, if you will. I kind of like that, because, well, it provides a lot more questions around the creation of the first ones, but also how the first ones came to create what we see today, and how exactly that would function. Why did they decide that it would be better to have 6 cosmological forces that each represent a fundamental part of their own personalities, rather than having just one cosmological force that represents the fullness of their personalities? What exactly happened in our universe that forced these beings to create these 6 different elements of their own personalities?
Terror of Mortis and those that we come across in the mall, they literally read our anima and they say, oh, the prophecies have fulfilled, the predestined mall walkers, as well as the locations are extremely precise. Like there's one in the mall that we needed, the one in the Corvia that we needed, and one is Terror of Mortis. And Terror of Mortis is a domain where nobody was actually supposed to go. But it's specifically spot where we were predestined to go to that the keepers say, like, oh, Mall Walker of Fate, you've come here. Similar to how the jailer was not just stabbing in the dark in order to get his plans going. He could predict at the end of Wrath of the Lich King that Sargeras was not going to destroy Azeroth. He was not going to miss Azeroth. He was going to precisely stab him in such a way that the blood of Azeroth was going to fulfill his plans. So while the idea of the first ones are predestined, it seems like the storyline supports a more accurate path as we know what's going to go.
Well, I think that, the thing you need to keep in mind is perspective and belief as well. So like the denizens that the attendants, for example, that we met in Oribos or in Corthia, or some of the enlightened brokers that we met in Zereth Mortis, these were people who believed in something. They were sort of, they had these things, whether you think of them as prophecies or doctrines that they believed in. They've been kind of waiting a very long time for some of these things to come to pass. And when somebody believes in a prophecy or a doctrine like that, they look for ways to make it true when someone shows up that does something that falls in line. We see that in the real world all the time, of like people want a pattern to be true, or they want a theory to be true. And when they see things that they can put into that pattern to make it seem true, it feels like a prophecy fulfilled. And so whether that's exactly true or whether it's just a point of view of these characters is something that you can think about and debate. But in no way has the fate of the mortals of Azeroth been pre-written. And they're...
Yeah, but I would say that you guys could probably have done a better job of showing that in the game. So, for example, they could have put different attendants and different keepers that believe different truths. So, for example, they could have created keepers that view us as enemies because they regard a different truth as true. And this would immediately let the player go, wait, so some of these guys believe that we were predestined to come here to save Zereth Mortis, but some of these guys actually have a very different belief. They believe that, you know, the first ones will return to save Zereth Mortis, you know, as far as their codified ideological belief is. So it would have been a lot more prevalent, because you also now have this, you know, like Nobbel showed the excerpt from the Sylvanas novel, where Zuval knew that Sargeras was going to stab the planet, but not too deep to kill Azeroth. He's not going to slice the planet in half to kill Azeroth. He's also not going to not stab Azeroth. He knew that Azeroth would be stabbed just deep enough to where her blood would fulfill his plans. That, to me, isn't necessarily a belief. It is a prophecy, and one from a true prophet, because it all came to be exactly the way that it was said to be. Now, the easy fix for that is just to have that be a coincidence. In other words, because Sargeras did not kill Azeroth, but instead just stabbed her, this worked in the jailer's favor, and that is why the jailer decided that it was now time to rip open the skies and for his plan to be, you know, fulfilled, because the blood of Azeroth had been spilt, and that is all he required. You know, but his plans would have been put on hold if Sargeras had, for example, slashed the planet in half, because then he can't use the blood of Azeroth, and now he has to look for another Titan that whose blood he can actually use in order to make his plans come to fruition. That would probably have been a better way than you know, just sort of now afterwards saying, oh, you know, he just believed really hard and that's why it happened. So basically the power of belief kind of thing.
They're just kind of walking through a script. The thing that separates mortals from magical beings is free will. That's something that's unique to the mortal soul. That's what makes it distinct. Even when you were in the Shadowlands, there was a difference between souls that had come over and the things that they did versus beings that were of magic, of death magic in that case. And so while magical beings are kind of driven by the influence that they are a part of to promote that influence, to propagate that influence, to try to make that influence the most dominant force in the cosmos, it's mortals who have the free will to decide what their destiny is, what their fate is, which way they're going to do, which powers they're going to embrace. That's why as players, we can embrace all these different sorts of powers and use them kind of at our will. It's because mortals have that choice, and that's unique among the beings who are rooted in magic.
I love that you say, like, free will is very important for character design. And you mentioned earlier, like, that they had this belief and that they made their own prophecies, like, kind of, they want it to happen. But at the same time, there's, like, proof it's in the pudding. Like, they tell us, like, if you are the true Mallwalker, this gateway, as prophesied, will open up for you. And wouldn't you know it, it actually opens up for us. So it does seem like the game supports the idea of predestined. But that is a debate. Oh, I would love to talk to you for 5 hours. You have no idea. But we only have 30 minutes today. Going for Dragonflight.
I want to throw something in here because it's something that I've wanted to discuss, but it's so small that I couldn't really make a video on it on its own. But I do want to throw this in here. Choice and free will in World of Warcraft have, in my opinion, always been very much underserved. It's yes, in terms of the gameplay, free choice is absolutely a thing that we have always been able to do. And now with the new talent systems, that's even becoming more prevalent now. You can choose whichever talent you want. You can choose the playstyle that you want. To some extent, you know, cookie cutters are always going to exist to influence that free choice, but never mind. If you're just a casual like me, you don't give a fuck about that. The thing that I would love to, I guess, have seen, and this specifically stood out to me as a very big missed opportunity. At some point in Zereth Mortis, the NPCs turn to you and they're like, champion, what should we do? because you reach an impasse. I can't remember exactly what the impasse was, but something happened and the plans of the NPCs basically came crumbling down. It didn't work the way that they had hoped it would work. And they go, champion, you should give us advice. What are we supposed to do here? And then the next quest you pick up, they tell you what you're supposed to be doing here. Like, they don't even ask you, what do you think we should do? And then maybe give you 2 or 3 options of, what you think you could do in order to get it done. It just says, champion, we need your help. And I thought in that moment, I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. I'm finally being involved in the story. This is so rare in World of Warcraft that the player is actually involved in the story. But then, of course, literally the next quest, they have thought up a new plan. And this is the new plan that you're now going to be doing. Now, I'm not saying that Blizzard should go in depth and design, 4 different options for how a quest can play out. That's not necessary. But even if you just gave the player 3 different options, and if you choose the wrong thing, an NPC maybe reacts and says, oh, that would not work because of this, this, and this. So that's going to be very wrong. And then maybe you choose the other wrong option, and the NPC goes, are you sure that's what we should do? What happens if we do this, and then this happens, and this happens, and this happens, and then we just die? And then maybe you choose the right one, but at least then you still felt like you were respected in that choice. You had at least some, choice that you could make, rather than being asked for your opinion, not being able to give your opinion, and the NPCs just continue without you, as if you didn't even fucking exist. That was a major gripe for me within the story, and there was just that one moment that stood out to me. It's just very weird.
Real quick to the first ones. Could you tell us, will we see much more influence of them?
Of the first ones?
Yeah.
Dragonflight is really rooted
Tripsy,
back into terrestrial Azeroth and dealing with the stories of the dragons, their connection to the Titans. That's a big storyline. So no, this isn't an expansion that's rooted in the cosmic powers or the stories of the first ones. Really, it is really focused on the aspects, the kind of legacy that they have, that connection to the Titans.
Like Emerald Dream. Oh, Emerald Dream. Life Domain.
The Emerald Dream, all of that stuff. So we really wanted to root the story in this. Those cosmic themes are out there, and they'll certainly inform future plot lines and things like that. But Dragonflight is really about what's going on in Azeroth with the aspects.
Awesome. Honestly, I hope I don't come across as too rough or too cross, because it's all out of a passion for the world of Warcraft and a storyline that we all love.
I totally understand.
Very excited about Dragonflight as well. So far what we've seen, going back to the ground of thing, not just the game mechanics, but also storyline build-up is great. I think we've got a couple more minutes left, so I got a lightning round on questions that I'm very curious about. Azeroth has been said to be cleansed of the old gods. N'Zoth, C'Thun, Yogg-Saron, Y'Shaarj, all gone. Is that true?
The influence of the void as embodied by the old gods has not gone away. While we've defeated some of the old gods themselves, we did.
Did he just say some of the old gods themselves? By my count, we've defeated all of the old gods. No? Either through proxy by the Titans or just by straight up defeating them. And I'm pretty sure he just said while we've defeated some of the old gods. Very interesting.
Beat them on the mortal plane, after all, and they are not beings of the mortal plane. And if you can extrapolate some of the kind of cosmic rules of what that means, then that kind of gives you your own answer, or at least some things to think about.
They're not beings of the mortal plane. I made a video a while back about the old gods and what the old gods are, and I basically likened it to to Warhammer 40k, where you have the Materium and the Immaterium, and these two realms, while definitely impacting each other and crossing over into each other, they're not the same. A being of the Materium will find it very difficult to exist in full in the Immaterium and vice versa, because these realms are fundamentally different. And, I would love the idea of, we didn't defeat the old gods. We simply pushed the old gods back into Ny'alotha. So, due to us fighting the old gods, Ny'alotha is a different dimension that exists on Azeroth, and the old gods are now trapped within Ny'alotha, looking once again for some kind of an escape, but they're still very much on Azeroth. Their physical flesh is just, that's been defeated, but they can always come back, and they always have the ability to come back. I would love that. Because I do think the old gods are just fundamentally one of the most interesting forces on Azeroth. I was going to hate when the first ones show up, take off their masks, and say, it's Titan time. Dude, I would fucking cry myself to sleep.
I wanted to I wanted to follow it up, but I love it. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Okay, so we've seen a time skip in-game, and just today on the PTR we got like the wedding of Lorthmar Phalistra. Some time has passed on Azeroth, just to give it a chill moment. Now we've also seen at the Forsaken that they have unlocked the power to cleanse the Blight from Lordaeron. What about Gilneas? Will we ever see the return of Gilneas for the Worgen? Is that perhaps something in the works?
That is a storyline that we have not forgotten about.
Fair enough.
Nice.
Okay. The Centaur on the Dragon Isles. In the Collector's Edition, it clarifies that the Centaur that the ones we know are merely a copy of the ones that came before, the ones on the Dragon Isles. So where exactly did the ones on the Dragon Isles come from?
Well, I wouldn't call it a copy per se, but what I would say is that Centaur are a native race to Azeroth. They've been around for a long time, and so they date back to the time when there was the supercontinent of Kalimdor. And so the Maruk Centaur that we see in Dragon Isles, the Centaurs were very contentious, just like the ones that we know today. And the Maruk broke off because they were a bit more enlightened. They wanted to get away from the conflict, and that took them to the lands that would be the Dragon Isles. And really, the Centaur that had existed in the rest of Kalimdor just fought one another to extinction. And so you didn't see the Centaurs that were kind of more located in central Kalimdor died off. And it was just the Maruk that we know of that persisted. But that doesn't change the mythology that we know of the Centaurs. And the Kalimdor Centaurs of modern Warcraft, they were kind of reintroduced to the world through those magical means. And so the Centaurs we know today are kind of their own reintroduction, I guess you would say. But the roots of Centaurs date back to the early history of that.
I actually don't mind that answer at all, because it makes it... Okay, so first it confirms a couple of things. It confirms that the Dragon Isles was indeed part of the original super landmass Kalimdor, the Land of Eternal Stars. The kind of now confirms it, because they traveled to these lands that would ultimately break off and become what we would now know as the Dragon Isles. But also, it just shows that magic is imitation of life. So in other words, through magic, they took a being that was thought long extinct and made it once more, for, creating an army or for whatever purpose they may have been created. But, I don't mind that answer. It's a good answer. It gives... I think it puts to rest anyone that sort of thought that this was a massive retcon of the story. It shows at least that they did think through this. So he could have been frozen and they walk over it. It's possible, but I would doubt it. Domago.
Azeroth itself.
Okay, so the original Centaur, they were always just there, because we were kind of wondering, so we have Fedadras and Zatar, son of Cenarius, that got together and they made the Centaur that we've always known. And now we got these original ones. So the whole idea of Cenarius together with Fedazane is not a thing. They were just native creatures of the land.
Well, again, we're not changing that storyline at all, but that was a reintroduction of new tribes of Centaurs to the world. The older ones, apart from the Maruk, as far as we know, had died off.
Okay, and they were just there, similar to like the Tauren, how they were always there. Yeah. Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, the mortal races, they've evolved over time as well. From that kind of primordial age when mortals first started to emerge.
Okay. This one, I'm already ready for a shutdown. There's been some data mine stuff when it comes to the Green Dragon Ysera. In the Collector's Edition, we also see a beautiful symbol of Ysera and Rephion, but not her daughter Marifra. But Ysera has been bound in the Shadowlands to Ardenweald. What does that mean for her future in Dragonflight?
Well, that is a big storyline that plays out through the course of Dragonflight, and yeah, I don't think it's a secret at this point to say that Ysera is certainly involved in the storyline, but her role needs to change because she was awakened in Ardenweald through the Winter Queen's direct intervention, and that means that she didn't get reborn through the normal cycle of slumbering at Ardenweald, then emerging into the dream. And if she had done that, then maybe she could have returned to Azeroth as she was. But now she is bound to that power, and so she is bound to both life and to death. And that's going to have implications on her storyline. And Marithra is very much a part of that story as well.
Beautiful. Yeah, if Elune wills it, she will soar through the skies again. Okay. Dragons and the domain of order are going to play their part in the storyline, as we already seen from the whole primalist section coming up. Could you hint at other primal forces that we might see play a part in the expansion? Some of the cosmic force, I should say. Sorry.
Again, it's we're not really delving into the cosmic forces as these kind of disembodied things. There's certainly Titan stuff that plays out in this expansion because the history of dragons and Titans are so tied together.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And in fact, when the expansion starts, Alexstrasza is looking for a way to re-empower the aspects because they've got this enemy that they need to face, and they were only able to defeat before when they were at their full strength, and they're much diminished now compared to what they once were. And her first instinct is to, well, Tyr isn't around anymore, so how could we re-empower ourselves? And in the Dragon Isles are these oath stones that were the symbol of the Titans' bond with the dragons. And she thinks that if they can set the flights right, that will re-empower these oath stones, and maybe that magic can restore the aspect. So that's guiding us through the level up experience of Dragonflight, and you'll see those oath stones through the course of the story. And whether that works or not, whether she has to try something else, that remains to be seen. But that relationship between the dragons and the Titans, both in their history and the implications of that, are very much part and parcel of this storyline.
Awesome.
I'm gonna go out on a whim and say that the Void will also probably play a giant part in this story. So we're probably gonna see two cosmic forces in this story, Titans and Void, mainly because if you claim that there is like the Titans are an integral part to the story of dragons, which is true. Without the Titans, there is no Dragonflights, and without the Dragonflights, there is no expansion. But the Void is a very fundamental part of this story as well. Because for as long as we have known, there has always been some kind of clash on Azeroth between the Void and the Titans. The Light has had its moments, and sure, it's caused its problems. The Foul has had its moments, and it's caused its problems. Death has had its moments, and it's caused its problems. But those two forces are as primordial to Azeroth as Azeroth itself is primordial to our existence.
It's one of the more interesting ones. The feedback I've seen so far, it's reminiscent of the Kyrian storyline with the Maelsworn, where you see that there's this story established, and yet there's more to it. Now, when it comes to Kyrian and Maelsworn, we saw that, for example, Devils was quickly taken off the stage, and we were quickly allying to just the Kyrian. It's their way, even though at the end of the fact, it was shown that the Maelsworn actually had a valid point. Do you feel similar to the Dragonflight storyline as it's building up so far? For those worried that we might have a repeat of history, do you have anything to say to them?
In terms of repeating which part of history?
Just signing up with the Kyrians, for example, just signing all the Titans, they're the good guys, and their other point of view is swept to the side, and we're just gonna wipe them out.
Yeah, well, I think that some of our best villains, both in Warcraft and in other media, start with having understandable motivations. And when you look at the Incarnates, the first one of which is Razageth that we see unleashed, and you think about what the Primalists were being driven by, they have a valid point. Their entire philosophy was just rooted in this idea that dragons should not be touched by outside influences. They should be free to be their own beings and not be changed by the magic of the Titans, for example. And that was a disagreement at first, and disagreements led to conflict, and conflict led to war. And what makes someone a villain is not necessarily the ideology they have all the time. Sometimes it can be the actions that they will take in service of that ideology. So with the Incarnates, even though they started in an understandable place, they've done some very nasty things throughout history. And we will learn more about that as the story unfolds. And we will see that they started out with, again, those relatable intentions, but ended up in a place that the aspects really had to fight against them for the sake of preserving not only their own kingdom, but Azeroth as a whole.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Like, honestly.
Please don't make the Titans good guys. For the love of all things that is holy, please do not make the Titans good guys. Because, yes, absolutely, the Primalists could be bad guys, even though what they are is understandable. But at the same time, we could look at what the Primalists became, and we could say, all right, if it wasn't for the Titans and their actions, the Primalists would never have done what they had done. So I would use the Kyrian as a very good example of this. We could look at the Moorsworn, and we know that what the Moorsworn wanted was wrong. Ultimately, the way in which the Moorsworn went about their business was evil, because it would put every one of us in danger. So they were a worthy foe to try and stop. But at the same time, what motivated them to become these evil beings that wants to destroy all of the cosmos? Well, that is because of the incredibly sus behavior of the Accolonn and the Kyrians. So you could have multiple enemies at the same time. You don't have to ally with the lesser of two evils. You could absolutely say, well, I'm not allying with any of you, because yes, I will fight the Primalists now, because what they're doing, they're an immediate threat, but I have my eye on you. I'm about to come for you too, you evil bastard. Don't think I don't know that you are very much to blame for how things are playing out now. I really hope that Blizzard does not make the Titans the good guy, even though all of the Titans' actions led to the Primalists becoming as evil as they are. It should absolutely not be presented in that way. I think that would be just horrible.
The things that you're saying right now, it's making me more and more excited about the story of Dragonflight, honestly, with that mindset. I think we're just about out of time. My last question to you is, if you had to pick one thing to be most excited about for the story of Dragonflight, without spoilers, what would it be?
It honestly is just adventuring alongside the aspects and seeing them be awesome again. You know, after giving up their powers to defeat Deathwing, they had a downturn, and you know, they've been kind of adrift a bit in terms of, you know, what their future was, what they were doing, and this whole expansion is really about making these characters awesome again, and to soar alongside them. You know, like you saw in our cinematic, there's that feeling of being in their presence and seeing them do these awesome things and helping them, you know, find not only the greatness that they once had, but like, what is their future? That's just an awesome, fun story to tell. And I'm super excited. Our whole team really embraced that and was excited about all these characters. And I think that love and care will come through as you're playing through the expansion.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much. Yeah,
right.
I hope everybody at home is as hyped
this.
as I am. And thank you very much for your time for answering all of our questions.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of fun. Let's talk again.
Yes, please. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
And there you have it, the end of the interview. Again, thank you so very much to Steve and everybody else at Blizzard for making this happen, for sitting down with me and letting me do this interview. I had a blast. I think I mentioned it mid-interview. I could sit down with them for 6 hours and deep dive into the story that they're being told, that they're doing, feedback on and all that. All in all, my major takeaway from this is that they're telling me everything right. They're telling me that there's going to be an adventure in Dragonflight, that we're going to go back to basics, that instead of dealing with fractures and cosmic forces, like the cosmic forces will play their part, but they're not going to take front and center. That has me excited. And I mentioned this during the reactionary trailer for the pre-patch. When they drop a trailer or cinematic and my reaction to it is pretty much one-on-one with how they wanted to convey it, that means they got a mindset when it comes to the storytelling. Obviously, interviews, I'm hoping that their mindset is actually going to become a reality. I'm hoping that we're going to see that delivered within Dragonflight. I'm excited for the launch. I'm excited for the coming month. And beyond that, only time is going to tell. For now, thank you very much for watching, everyone. Subscribe if you like my videos. Leave a like if you enjoyed this one. And until next time, see ya.
So I would say my takeaway from this interview, very good interview. I do hope that Blizzard will in the future start doing longer interviews rather than, these sort of, let's say 30-minute interviews, because I don't think you get interviews really is about also getting feedback. Because if you allow the guy that's interviewing you to actually push back on some of the things that is answered, you get some kind of semblance of where the community is that you don't really get when it's just a straight up, I ask a question, you answer the question, and then I ask the next question. Now, I do think Nobbel did a great job of actually sacrificing some of his questions by pushing back on some of the answers. But obviously, because you only have 30 minutes, you are sacrificing some of your question time when you do that, because they gave you 30 minutes and they're very, very specific. Whenever you get that 30 minutes, that is all you get. So I really hope that they will do longer than that. But I think Nobbel did a fucking stand-up job of this interview. And I agree. I agree with everything that Nobbel said. And specifically, I like everything that Steve Danuser said. It's back to basics. It's the things that made all of us fall in love with World of Warcraft in the first place. Just, in a new experience, which I think after the last few years of incredible cosmic level power problems the whole time, it's nice to think that we're going back to the basics. It's nice to think that we're going back to Azeroth, and Azeroth is the one that's going to matter, and none of the other bullshit things is going to matter in this expansion. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I've already said this in my playthrough of the Drakthir, but I'll say it here again. I already think that Blizzard is much better at telling stories this time around than what they were in the past. If you don't know what I'm saying, literally go level a Drakthir and come talk to me afterwards. It is an incredible experience. The quest design is still as shit as it's ever been, with the exception, with a few exceptions. There are phenomenal quests, but then you still have sometimes these quests that just send you out to go kill a bunch of things. That's very needless and very useless, but that has always been World of Warcraft's way. But the way the story, so almost every single quest, when you hand it in, there's a conversation that happens between the NPCs. That you stand there and the NPCs are talking about what you just did. And it's completely voice acted. And you get this little conversation that gives you a little bit of subtext and, gives you a little bit more insight. And then you go and you do another quest, you hand it in, and there's another conversation that happens. You're not tied to that conversation. You can absolutely just pick up the next quest and leave. You don't have to listen to them discuss it. But like me, I stood there and I fucking listened to every single thing they said. And it was really cool. So that right there is a giant leap forward when it comes to storytelling in World of Warcraft. And I'm really excited to see how this is going to be approached in Dragonflight, because obviously I haven't played Dragonflight. I have no idea what that story is going to feel like. But if the Drakthir starting area is anything to go by, I am super excited for what Dragonflight has to offer. I'm just absolutely excited for it.